All right, so the way the average rate of change works is you're going to be given a function. We're just going to call it f, okay? And then you're going to be given two x values. That's why they're called x1 and x2. They're two separate x values. So what you're going to do is, to apply this formula, is you're going to take your second x value, you're going to plug it into your function, you're going to work it out. That's what f of negative 2 is, okay? Then you're going to take the first x value, you're going to plug it into your function, and you're going to work it out. Then you're going to subtract those results. So f of x2, the second one, minus f of x1, which is the first one. And then that's just going to be over the actual x values being subtracted. The same one goes first at the top than it does at the bottom. Everybody ready? Okay. So we're going to start. We're finding the average rate of change. You're given a function up at the top. I'll give you a minute to write that down. Finding the average rate of change for the function f of x is equal x to the fourth. Now, because this is a fraction, sometimes they work out to be whole numbers, sometimes they don't. You can just leave them in fraction form as long as they're completely simplified. So we are finding the average rate of change for f of x equals x to the fourth. And starting with number 1, I have two x values. I have -1 and I have 0. So this first one is what I'm going to call x1. The second one is what I'm going to call x2. It really doesn't matter which one you choose as long as you're consistent at the top and the bottom. Whichever one you use first on the top, you have to use first on the bottom. It makes more sense to me to whatever's listed first as x1, whatever's listed second as x2. Doesn't mean it has to be done exactly that way. So we're going to start by finding f of 0. That means I'm going to take 0 and I'm going to plug it into this function right here in place of x. So I'm going to take 0 to the fourth power, which gives me what? 0. Okay. Then I'm going to find f of the second one, or x sub 1, whatever, the other number. Again, we're plugging that in for x. If I do -1 times -1 times -1 times -1, what does that give me? +1. Everybody okay so far? Yes, ma'am. It's up in the problem, the x to the fourth. See at the top where it says f of x equals x to the fourth? For this particular problems, yeah. The functions may change for each problem, but in this one it's going to be that. Okay. All right, so then what we're going to do is we're going to take f of the second one, so the f of 0, minus the result of the second one, which is a +1, over, and then we just take the actual numbers, the x sub 2, which is 0, minus the x sub 1, which is -1, and we're going to simplify. So if I do the top, 0 minus 1 is -1. And at the bottom, 0 minus a -1 turns to 0 plus 1, which is 1. And what does -1 over +1 reduce to be? Just -1. So my average rate of change for that function between -1 and 0 is -1. The reason it's not identical to slope is slope is linear. Slope are for lines, rise over run. Well, these other functions that we're graphing are not linear. They're curved, or most of them. So we just call it the average rate of change. It's kind of how we're going either up or down depending on what your average rate of change is. So it's similar to finding the slope, except for these aren't straight lines, if that makes sense. Do we need to do one more together and let you try after that, or you want to try number 2? Okay, let's do this one together then. Remember, the first one is x sub 1, second one is x sub 2. The function is still the same. It is still the x to the fourth function. We're just changing our values that we're finding the average rate of change between. So we're going to find the value of the function when x is 1. Again, it's still x to the fourth, so we're going to plug that in. What is 1 to the fourth power? 1. Okay. Then we're going to do the same thing for the second number. We're going to plug that in. You don't have to. You could do the first one first, but you have to keep it consistent. Whichever one you do first at the top, you have to do first at the bottom. I'll show you the other way and show you how it's the same thing. What is 0 to the fourth power? 0. All right, so we're going to go the first one, the result, the 1, minus the second one, which the result is 0. And then over my first x, which I'm calling x2, okay, the one I did first, that's what I mean by first, minus the one I did second, which was 0. What's 1 minus 0? And again is 1, and 1 over 1 reduces to be 1. Now, just to show you, if I were to do those same two, let's say I did it backwards. Let's say I called this one x to 2 and this one x to 1. You don't have to write this down. I just want to show you. That's 0. And then finding the other one. Okay, so I take this first one minus the second one over the first number I plugged in minus the second number I plugged in. 0 minus 1 is negative 1. 0 minus 1 is negative 1. And negative 1 over negative 1 reduces to still be positive 1. So either way you do it, you'll get the same thing. You just have to be consistent. Whichever one of these you use first in the top part, you have to use it first in the bottom part, if that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, you do. I was just showing you that if you did it the other way, you're still going to get the same thing. Whichever x you use, yes. Mm-hmm. I like to just keep it consistent. Whichever one's listed second, I'm going to call x2, and whichever one's listed first, I'm going to call x1. That way I don't get confused. Does that make a little bit of sense? All right, let's try something that's not 0 and 1. Y'all try that one. Because in your formula, it's your x2, which was this one, right? The x2 is 0, so we put that in. And then it's minus the x1, but the x1 is a negative. So when we minus a negative, that's when it turns off. Just because of that. Yeah. The bottom part, you go back to the original number again. Just this and just that, not by plugging it into the function. Plug in just the x value, not what you got. Remember, on the bottom, your formula is just your x2 minus x1, not what you got when you plugged them into your functions. Is everybody ready? I'm going to call the first one x1, call the second one x2, just because that makes more sense to me. Doesn't mean you have to do it exactly that same way. I'm going to take and plug in my second x into my function. What is 2 to the 4th power? 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. 16. Maybe. And then I'm going to plug in the first number. And 1 to the 4th power is just 1. So we do 16 minus 1. But on the bottom, I'm going back to the original x values. My x2 is just 2. My x1 is just 1. And I'm going to subtract those. What's 16 minus 1? And 2 minus 1. And so 15 over 1 just reduces to be 15, which is what I saw on my step-by-step. Make a little bit of sense? Again, you don't have to memorize the formula. I will put it on the board the day of the quiz. That way, it's one less thing for you to have to worry about. All right, new function. I want you to try both of those. Okay. All right, so our new function is up here. F of x is equal to x squared. So that's what we're going to be plugging into. This is my x1. This is my x2. So I'm going to find f of my second x first. What's 0 squared? 0. And then I'm going to find the first one. What's negative 2 squared? 4. Okay. So we're going to go the x2, the f of x2, 0, minus f of x1, which is 4. And then I just do the actual x values. The second x that I used was 0, minus the first one is a negative 2. 0 minus 4 is negative 4. If I do 0 minus a negative 2, that turns to 0 plus 2. And then what does negative 4 over 2 divide to be? Negative 2. Okay, which is what I saw on pretty much everybody's paper. Questions so far? All right. Same thing for the second one. Label the first one x1, second one x2. We're going to plug it in. 2 squared is 4. 0 squared is 0. So we're going to do f of x2 minus f of x1 over just x2 minus x1. 4 minus 0 is 4. 2 minus 0 is 2. And 4 over 2 divides to be positive 2. Yes, ma'am.
I did the same thing on number 4, but I got positive 2 and negative 2.
Let me come take a look at it.